It's very good that you have no clue about this show.
No, but someone said to me, did they make you cry? I was like, what are we doing here?
If I asked you, Eddie, who are you?
I was never a bad kid, but I had a bad attitude. When I was told to do things, I wouldn't do it. Yet when it was left on me, I did it.
How did you reach where you are today?
I'm not a genius, I'm not intellectual, but I understand how to win. Everything's about winning, everything. Sometimes too much, probably. Your gut feeling, your instinct is never normally wrong.
And do you like the fame?
Not really.
Are you a good salesman?
Yeah, I'm the best salesman. But one day, I will just walk off into the sunset. I'll let them all stay at it. I'm going, thank you, bye.
Hi, before enjoying watching this episode, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell.
Hi, Eddie.
Hi.
It's very good that you have no clue about this show, which I love.
No, but someone said to me, did they make you cry? Because they thought I filmed it yesterday. And I was like, what are we doing here? It's about to get into my mind.
I'm about to ask you about you. That's it. So the first question is always the same. How are you really doing?
It's a good question. I'm doing okay. You know, we've had a rough couple of weeks in the business. We had a big fight fall through. A fighter failed a drugs test. There was a lot of controversy. And I've had a lot of people reach out to me actually asking me that question, which is, it's good for society, you know? That I think as a man particularly, people are doing that. You know, there's a lot of talk about mental health and emotion. And I've noticed a lot of people, like no one's really phoned me before or messaged me and gone, just checking in on you, are you okay? And I was like, wow, is it really that bad? You know, but so yeah, I'm okay. Like I think someone asked me a similar question the other day and said, okay, is that okay? I said, yeah, okay. You know, you have good days, you have bad days. I think you just have to accept that every day is different. And good times, bad times, all part of the journey, all part of the roller coaster. I'm not a big overthinker, which I think is quite dangerous actually. You know, at the same time, I like to keep things quite simple. And if things aren't okay, or if I'm struggling a little bit, that's when I really keep things simple. You know, just to try and make sure that you focus on every day, short-term goals, you know.
How do you keep things simple?
By focusing on short-term goals, you know, day by day. So sometimes they laugh at me in the office because I write things down. I don't really use a laptop that much. I use my phone and I have a pad. And I write all my plans, all my mind in my pad, you know. And every time we have a meeting, I put out my pad and they go, here he goes with the pad. But sometimes, to keep it simple, I'll write down things that I want to do today, you know, because I feel like almost that regimental lifestyle is good for getting things in order and making sure that you feel like there's been some action, some fulfillment in that day, you know. So sometimes if we're going a little bit left and right, I just say, okay, number one, walk the dogs. Number two, fill the car up with petrol. And menial things. It doesn't have to be sign a big deal, you know, announce a fight. You know, it can be things that you just feel like have contributed to a productive day, you know, and I always advise people to do that, you know, to just write down 10 things to do today. You know, and they can be completely varied across life. Call your mum, you know, anything. And at the end of the day, just tick them off as you go. And then when you get home and when you go to bed, okay, we're back.
You know what you said, Eddie, is actually proven. It's proven that sometimes long-term goals or grandiose kind of goals are very demotivating, especially if you're not achieving as fast as you would think. So let's say a big fight. If you're only focused on that and not on, like you said, on your small-term goals, every day that is getting delayed by a week or 4 days or something happened, you're starting to be discouraged. So a human, it's like when we're with our kids, we're like, great job. I'm glad you cleaned the table. I'm glad you finished your plate.
Yeah.
It's so important for us to feel good that, you know, and I love what you're doing, because sometimes literally I called my mom, I did this, I sent the email, you feel good, and you're like, okay.
I'm a great procrastinator. I always put things off. It's one of my biggest weaknesses, you know. Probably my two biggest weaknesses are that, putting things off, procrastinating, and two, not making an impulsive decision. Sometimes I wait too long to make a decision. I overthink a decision, you know. Could be booking a hotel, right? You know, when you go on Expedia and you go, and you start off and you see one. And I'm trying to learn a little bit more that feeling when you see one and go, oh, that looks good. That's the one. Do you know what I mean? But I'll scroll through 5 or 6 pages and then I'll go back tomorrow and the one that I saw is gone, you know? So I'm trying to improve in those areas.
But you said you're not at all.
Yeah, but trying to not overcomplicate decisions. And I do that in a lot of different ways, but sometimes looking for the perfect moment. I like the saying, don't always wait for the perfect moment, take the moment and make it perfect. You know, and I think that's quite easy to do because your gut feeling, your instinct is never normally wrong. Never normally wrong.
Very nicely said, never normally wrong. And I heard another nice thing. A guy was talking, it was one of those Instagram videos that pops up. And he said, you know what? I always trust my gut feeling about people. Yeah, maybe sometimes 1 or 2 I'll get wrong, but 8 out of 10 I'll get it right. So fuck the 2.
Exactly.
And I'm like, you know what? Okay, it's a good ratio.
Generally, your gut feeling is right. You know, sometimes it is wrong, but it's not. It's a good ratio, like you said.
Yeah,
80-20.
Right
80% of the time, no problem.
Yeah. If I asked you, Eddie, who are you? How would you describe yourself?
I think I'm a pretty normal guy. My life has changed a lot. Like from, you know, I come from a very successful father who come from a very humble beginning. And I've evolved a lot as a person, you know, throughout my life. Very different person than I was at 15, 16. Very different person that I was in my 20s. More different than I was in my 30s, but we kind of get to this point now. And I am someone that's proud of my family and the history and what they've built. I'm someone that is very competitive, very driven. And a lot of it derives around sport. You know, I say to a lot of kids these days, particularly my children, like, we talked, you know, off camera about that social media world and that the world away from reality, that sport gave me so many foundations for. Like, and the more I think about it, like when I was playing sport as a kid and even in my 20s and 30s, I never really thought about what sport taught me, you know? And what sport taught me was particularly boxing as a kid, discipline, respect, manners, winning, losing, teamwork, individuality, pressure, mental well-being, physical well-being. You know, all these things now that the kids are missing, actually, who are growing up. And my childhood was, you know, my dad, everything's about winning. Everything. Sometimes too much, probably. You know, and I only say that now as I get older and I have kids, you know, but I was told that winning is everything. Everything. And I guess he is, and I have been, although I'm just chilling out a little bit in my older years, obsessed with winning or trying to win, you know, and you have to be a little bit careful sometimes. So going back to your question, I think I'm a normal guy who likes to do normal things, in all honesty. You know, my life's changed a lot because of the success that we've had as a business and myself a little bit as, I guess, a personality. You become a little bit more well-known and, you know, you get a bigger profile and a bigger following and stuff like that. And that's quite interesting, how to handle that and how your life changes in that respect.
And your childhood, how was it?
It was good. My dad worked away a lot, but when he was around, he would give us all his time, you know, and we would play sport all the time. So we would play cricket in the garden, we would box together, we would play table tennis, we would play like football, like everything. But everything, again, going back to You know, he wasn't the guy where you take 5 penalties and you've missed 4 and he'll let the last one in through his legs. He'll tip it round the corner and dive and save it, you know? And it's like, next time you might get one, you know? So my childhood was, I say normal because my parents were working class, like, and my nan and granddad were working class. They're from the East End of London, good family values, like, you know, roast dinner on a Sunday, the whole family would be there enjoying it, and, you know. But at the same time, my dad found wealth when I was young. So my life was going to boxing fights, he's sitting in changing rooms. You know, he had a limousine back then where he was driving fighters around, and I was there and I was carrying belts out, and like, and as a kid, I was flash as a kid, 14, 15, 16. Bit embarrassing looking back, you know, not a nice kid. I always had a good heart, but I was in this world that made me probably a bad kid at school, really. I got expelled from the school that I was at, had to go to a college that wasn't quite as nice. But because I was never a bad kid, but I had a bad attitude because I didn't have respect for teachers, which is embarrassing now. But, you know, when you're living in that world of hanging around world championship fighters and you go back to school on a Monday and you got this teacher telling you, and you're thinking, who are you? You know, it's a terrible attitude. I do get embarrassed by it, but I learned a lot from those experiences as well.
And your mum? How was
My mum
that?
is a real old school, traditional East End woman. You know, East End is a part of London where, you know, and she will make sure, you know, the world's changed a lot, you know. She will make sure that my dad has an ironed shirt hanging on the door every morning before work. She will make sure that when he gets home from work, dinner is on the table. And that's just how it was back then. Now the world has evolved incredibly, and he does actually like to cook now, you know. But she is that, you know, that was never a bad thing for her. That was a role in life. So she's very traditional. Value for money like you've never seen. I mean, she would drive an extra 5 miles to get 10 pence off a pint of milk.
Interesting.
You know?
Yeah.
Which has been good for my dad, because my dad's quite flash.
Okay.
And he may have lost his money if he didn't have her, you know? So they've worked very well. And they've been together since they were 16, 17.
How lovely.
Yeah.
Happy?
Yeah, you know, I mean, as he's told me, you know, we've nearly strangled each other 2,000 times. But I think any relationship has their ups, especially going through, I feel like to go through a relationship from 15 or 16 or wherever when they met, you know, to 74. Like, I feel like your life changes a lot. You become a completely different person. And that's quite difficult in a relationship, you know, to actually grow together, and the person that you were when you met, you're no longer that person. And it's quite a mad journey, really. And that's what I found out a lot about life, you know, about myself, is how you do change. And when you look back, like I said, to that 15 or 16-year-old kid and just go, oh, no, was that me? And sometimes I meet people from school and they're like, oh, I went to school with you. And I'm like, oh, no, you know, but, you know, life lessons.
You know, Eddie, one of the best things I've heard recently, and he was a guest, and he said how in his marriage, he ended up getting divorced after maybe 20 years though. But he said in that bunch of years, let's say 20 years, he had to fall in love with his ex-wife 6 times. Because he's like, you said, you keep changing, so you have to keep falling in love with your wife. Even your wife today. After 5 years, Eddie is 4.0, she's 3.0, 6.0. So you need to still fall in love again, because it's a new person. And he made me think, like, I guess that's how your mom and dad did it. You know, they have to keep falling for each other and liking each other.
Yeah, I just think you change so much, you know, and I think it's impossible not to change during life, because of the experiences you have, the values that you have, the dreams you have, the targets that you have, you know, and that's the amazing, that's the one thing I've learned most about life, I think, is that you never stop changing. And you know, at 43 now, I'm thinking, is that it? Is this me now? Probably not. Probably when I'm 53 or 63 or 73, Inshallah, I get there, you know, it's a case of, wow, I'm so different to how I was at 44. I remember having that conversation.
Imagine, yeah.
Where I didn't know about life, you know, and you feel like you know a lot more about life than obviously you did in your 30s and your 20s.
What is something you would have liked to change in your parents when you were young?
Change in them? Difficult, really. Like, I feel that my dad, I guess maybe him being around a little bit more. Like, I see that a lot with my own children. Obviously, I haven't seen them now for 3.5 weeks because I've been traveling all around the world to events. And that's a mirror, really, of my childhood as well. So, but again, I feel like the effort that he put in, you know, was enough for me. I mean, I would sit there, he would get home, we would go and play in the garden for an hour, and then he'd say, right, go on, go and have your dinner, and I've got to do some work. He would go in the study, and I would, after dinner, just go and sit in the study, you know, and he would be working for the next 2 hours, and I would just sit there. I might have a cricket ball, just throwing it up, I might have a football, just kicking it around, but I would be subconsciously listening to his conversations, not knowing it at the time, listening to the arguments. You know, he was a boxing promoter as well, so, you know, and arguing with actually the same people that I argue with now that are still going, you know. But I really wouldn't change a lot. You know, I felt very loved as a kid, really. But again, you know, the hardest thing as a parent who works like that, because I've found, is actually putting that time and effort in when you do get home. Because sometimes the last thing you want to do, as much as you love your kids, is actually to go and spend an hour playing football in the garden. You know, you just want to lock yourself in a room sometimes and just lay there and, you know, have some food and watch a bit of TV. So that's the responsibility of a parent. And I always thank him for that, because he never made me feel like he didn't want to do it. Where I'm sure he didn't want to do it. But at the time, I didn't feel like that. And that, you know, that was important.
So important. How come I read that he thought you were spoiled when you were young.
Yeah.
Why?
Because he came from nothing, right? So his dad was a bus driver, and just before I was born, or a few years before, he started to make money and became successful. We bought a nice house, you know, and I grew up in a nice house. You know, my parents had money. We went on nice holidays, you know, we had nice cars. And his mum used to clean houses for wealthy people. And he said that growing up, he almost not despised the wealthy people, but, you know, because his mum had to go and work for them like that, he thought to himself, one day, you know, I'm going to be that successful person. And, you know, I want to look after my mum and, you know, etc. And the kids of those successful people, you know, or the kids at his school who had money, he hated. So it was always like, I'm not letting you be one of those kids, because I can't stand. To him, there was nothing worse than a spoiled kid, you know. And he would always make me, I was spoiled, like, because I think when you do well, you want to spoil your kids in a way, as long as you can make sure they understand about manners and respect. But everything was like, looking back, you know, it would be like, Dad, you know, can we go and, you know, I've seen a new pair of football boots that I'd like for the team that I'm in, and blah, blah, blah. No problem. You got to clean my shoes every night for 2 weeks, all 7 pairs. And then at the end of those 2 weeks, you can have them.
I respect
you know,
that.
Which, like, small things like that, which actually, you know, as a parent now, I have 2 daughters, which is different. I know you shouldn't treat them differently to how you treat a son, but I have a sister, and he definitely treated her differently to how he treated me. But that is missing from the younger generation now. Like, if I asked my daughter to clean my shoes, I'm not sure how that would go down. You know, she might want, you know, some Robux or whatever they're called, you know, that they play, or something on Fortnite, or, you know, whatever. But back then, that was his way of saying, everything you get, you have to earn in some way, through hard work, through success, through achievement, you know, through excellence, but you have to work for it. So if you want these boots, I have no problem. And I want to buy them for you because I want you to have the best. But you have to clean my shoes for 2 weeks, you know? And it was quite a regimental lifestyle in that respect. You know, and in other areas, he would spoil me rotten. But he would always bring it back to, you know, he would have this jar that he would put his change into. And I was obsessed with, you know, he's money mad, my dad. I mean, you know, that is a reality. But I would count it with him, you know, the coins. And that's £1 there. And then when we get 10 of them, that's £10, you know? And it was like, looking back, just crazy really, because he's definitely more obsessed with money than I am. But it was just, you know, it was just things that he would try and maybe sometimes subconsciously drum into me and other times consciously drum into me to make sure that I understood value. And that was important to my mum as well, because she, you know, the one thing you know, he would go out and buy a sports car. She would definitely not. And she would tell him not to, you know, so it was just a nice mix.
What he taught you, I think, is so important because I struggle. It's a challenge even with my kids where if he wants something, the first instinct is to buy it for them because we can. But then I'm like, shit, when I die, is he going to be an independent, responsible person or everything was too easy? So I'm like, fix your bed for a week properly. Then. But sometimes I forget, obviously. But then I'm like, no, Anas, you need to do it this way. They need to know you need to do something to get something. That's life. You don't just get it.
No, for sure.
It's tricky.
It is, especially when you're doing well and you want to give your kids nice. There's nothing wrong with wanting to give your children nice things. You work hard to be able to. You know, nice holidays, you know, nice clothes. If they're driving, you know, you want them to have a nice car. But I feel like it still goes back to sport. You know, for me, like, and sport doesn't appeal to everyone, but I still look at, like, when my daughter plays football, it's one of the greatest feelings for me to watch. She's running everywhere. You know, she's putting the work in, she's tackling, she's there, she's back. After the game, she's shaking hands. You know, it just puts them in a different space.
100%.
You know?
100%. I think for me, football really taught me so much. And I always see sports as a life reflection. You have to deal with people you like, you have to deal with people you don't like, but you better perform together. Even if you don't like your teammate, respect has to be there. Like, it's so much. You can be the best player. If your goalkeeper doesn't want to save the ball, you lose. Doesn't matter. I also read that you saw yourself as stupid when you were young. Is this true?
Stupid, I don't know.
Like, literally, that's the sentence I read.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't like, I'm far from intellectual. Like, for me, the only thing I was interested in school was sport. But when I look back at my childhood, when I got to the 5th year, and when you go to the 6th form, the school said, we don't want him here anymore, right? And it was really embarrassing for my mum, like, and my dad. And I had a problem with authority for some reason, you know, like, because these people, these teachers, I didn't respect them. And that was my fault. It wasn't their fault. It was just, that was a flaw that I had. And then I went to college, a very average college, but there was 20 people in the class, and after the first week, there was 10 of us left. And the other 10 were downstairs messing around, smoking weed, like, just not going to the class. And I went up to the teacher and I was like, can I ask you a question? Like, what happens if you don't come? And he was like, I thought, it's up to you, really, you know. I thought, well, you don't even get told off, you know? And it was like, something sat in my mind that just made me, from then, every break, I didn't have any friends at college at all. And I just went to the library to work during my breaks, because but it was like, and psychologically, there's got to be a reason for that, why when I was told to do things, when they were on me all the time, right, Hearn, do this, do that, have you done that, have you done that, I wouldn't do it. Yet when it was left on me, I did it, you know? And that changed me a lot, those 2 years at college. And it sort of got my head in the game to go and leave school and go into employment, because I grew up a lot in that period because I don't think I would have worked the same way at school, being told what to do, and I rebelled against people telling me what to do, which again is a character flaw. But for some reason, and my own, my eldest daughter's a little bit like that. Sometimes if I keep telling her off, it just won't work. And in the end you go, no problem. I'll leave it to you. Sometimes that responsibility can bring out the best in you.
I believe, and I think that's sustainable. When you let people make a decision for themselves, it's like when if somebody goes to therapy, a really good psychologist doesn't tell you what to do. They let you figure it out. So their job is to ask you questions, and you're like, maybe I should do this. And they're like, I'm going to do that. Yeah. But then it's sustainable because you decided. But if they're like, you should do this, you should quit your job. Yeah. You're like, maybe. It's not sustainable. And then if you quit, you're like, I shouldn't have quit. Yeah. But if you made the decision, and I think that's you, like you need somebody to say, Eddie, what do you want to do? And then you won't accept failure. Yeah. It's interesting.
But it's something that we, it's very important to us as a business to give people the freedom and put the responsibility on them. I think for me, if I was in a job where someone was looking over me all the time, well, I want to report at 5 p.m. Tomorrow you've got to present to the team, you've got to do this, you've got to, it's like, I believe in you. So it's over to you. If you fail, it's on you. And maybe you won't last there forever. But if you have ability, if you work hard, if you want it enough, there is no ceiling to where you can go in this company. And that's important to us as a business, that people are given the freedom to move through the business, through the levels.
And Eddie, how did you reach where you are today?
Well, for me, again, you only find this when you look back. Like, again, at school, I wasn't a hard worker, but I've developed, and my friends always tell me and laugh at me, that this really quite sickening mentality of work to a level where I don't even know where it's come from, or I don't know how I do it, but it is got me to where we are. Like, I feel like I have ability, obviously, but I'm not a genius, I'm not intellectual, but I understand how to win, and I won't be outworked. So for me, what I didn't realise when I was that kid that was a bit obnoxious was I was Barry Hearn, my dad's son, right? No one really knew my name, especially at the boxing. I would go as a kid, I was Barry's boy, Barry's boy, Barry's boy. And I loved it at the time. Oh, do you know Barry Hearn? That's my dad. That's my dad. Tell everyone. But over time, you realise that actually, if you are ambitious, you have to achieve something beyond what he achieved to get any kind of respect or legacy or, success in your own name. And that was always the driver, probably. And I've only realised that over the last few years, the underlying driver. And it was when I was doing my podcast and I was speaking to people who had successful fathers who said the same thing. Like, I wanted to outperform my dad. Because everyone always said to me, well, you're only going to go and work for your dad. Your dad's got money. And I'm like, no, but I want to be a star. I want to be a winner. I want to have a successful dad. I want to beat my dad. And even to this day, we are, I say to him, I sold 90,000 tickets at the boxing. How did you do? I did the darts. We sold 10,000 at the O2, but our viewing figures were bigger. This is like me and my dad, So the only way I can be judged is me against him, really, in terms of my career. So I found a strange path. When I left college, I didn't want to work for my dad. I didn't want to work for the family business because of what everyone had always said. So I did 5 or 6 years in the sports marketplace until I realised I don't really want to work for anyone else. I want to work for our family business, and took that knowledge into the family business. I re-emerged and found myself back in boxing really by luck after spending my entire childhood around the sport. And from there, took the business from that sort of national business, which it was at the time, to a global business, breaking into different markets. A good example, my dad was a huge promoter in the UK, but never really you know, signed TV deals or staged major fights abroad. You know, we're now in 10 different markets, you know, and we're market leaders globally. So for me, that drive is, the only way I can explain it is a desire to outperform him and achieve something in my own right, really.
How interesting. You reminded me of a story. I think I'm getting the characters correctly. It's Maya Angelou, God rest her soul, and her son. The interview apparently was with her son. I hope I'm talking about the right person, but the story is the same. And somebody in the interview said, oh, how does it feel being under the shadow of your late mother? And he said, who said it's a shadow? I'm in her light.
Yeah.
So, and then I kept thinking while you're talking how, for example, some of these top athletes or whatnot, when they have kids, they usually crumble because the stardom is so strong and people keep comparing them. And I would say 9 out of 10 people who had a very successful father or very famous father, 9 out of 10 can't outshine.
Yeah.
You're that one.
Yeah.
Out
But the
of
work
10.
ethic is interesting because I work like I'm broke, right? But I've never been broke. And I've always had money. And that's the same in boxing. And when I did my podcast, as you know, a very famous footballer called Frank Lampard, right, from Chelsea, he went to my school. He was a year above me. And every night, I would see him over the fields with his dad, practicing, doing runs. And he was quite overweight as a kid, really. He was a good footballer at school, but his dad was a former West Ham player, very well known. Now you've never heard of his dad, right? And he signed with West Ham as a kid, Frank, at 17, 18. And everyone said it was a joke. He's only got in that team because his dad knows Harry Redknapp and he signed Frank Lampard. And Harry Redknapp said, no, I've signed Frank Lampard because I believe this kid is a fantastic player. Rubbish, you've done a favour. It was his nephew, right? He outworked everyone. And a player without loads of natural ability and flair, but outworked everyone and became one of the greatest players in the history of English football, right? And I had him on the podcast, and I said, it was like looking in a mirror, and it was like, what? And it was like, yeah, I wanted to outperform. I wanted to make a name for myself. And the only way, if he would have got in that West Ham team and just done okay, he wouldn't, you know, it would have always been Frank Lampard's son. But now, no one even knows Frank Lampard Senior. Everyone knows Frank Lampard Junior. You know, and that's we're quite similar in that respect. And it was an interesting, and especially fighters as well, because what I do is not tough. You know, like you don't have to. You know, it's tough mentally, and you know it can drain you. But when you talk about being a fighter, fighters come from difficult backgrounds. They want to fight their way out of their surroundings. So when you get fighters whose sons start to fight, I see it with Chris Eubank and Conor Benn and people like that. They train harder. They're tougher than the kids that come into the gym with nothing. So why is that? You know, it's something inside you. It's a will to win. It's desire. And when you want something so bad, it doesn't matter what background you come from. So to work like I work, why? You know, I don't really need it. I don't really need to, but you want to. It's in you. And when it's in you like that, and when you have that kind of fire, it's very difficult to be beaten.
Very interesting. And it's like you don't have to be the most skilled person, but you can outwork anybody.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you can outwork, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Talent's always important. But, you know, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. If you've got ability and you work hard, the key word is consistency. Consistency every day, doing the right things. And it's difficult when you speak to, especially the young, you know, I do a lot of talks in the community and with the young, with kids. And sometimes they might look at me and say, it's easy for you to say that, you know, you got born into some money and like stuff like that. But if you consistently do the right things, if you consistently work as hard as you can, there is no way you will not achieve. It's impossible. Now, if you're good at what you do as well, you have the potential to be great. But there is no way that if you work as hard as you can and you're consistent, that opportunities will not present themselves to you. Impossible. So consistency for me is a key word. And that's how sometimes if you have a tough time, that's something that I just understand. I know that if I stay consistent and keep doing the right things, we'll be okay.
You reminded me, Eddie, of the show. People don't realize, and you have a podcast and you have a business, that we haven't missed it a Tuesday. We release on Tuesday. We haven't missed it in 3 years, not even COVID.
Yeah.
Never. And when you really think of the team and the effort that goes into that, not missing it, I think you would relate, like you're not missing it. It's not easy. Because we enjoy it, maybe we don't think about it. But when you're like, shit, we didn't even miss a Tuesday. But then, like you said, if you just keep doing it consistently, I think it's such an underrated word, consistent.
Oh, without that. And if you miss a week, things might change.
Complacency.
Complacency is a killer. My dad will always say to me, don't get carried away. Don't get carried, I'll say to him, see the show on Saturday. And he'll always say, it doesn't matter where I am in the world, just come back from, we did Australia, we did Mexico, we did London, we're doing Abu Dhabi, we're in Cleveland next week. I said, did you see it? Did you see it? It was unbelievable. Don't get carried away. How can you not get carried away? Well, look at what we're doing. Just stay grounded. And complacency is the worst thing that can happen in business or life, actually. Relationships, business, anything. You start taking things for granted, you lose that drive and that passion for something, things will change.
I heard something interesting recently. They said there is no plateau. It's either you're going up or down. So the moment, you said, I work like I'm broke. As long as you're doing that, Eddie, you're good.
Yeah.
The moment you're like, I'm not bad.
Yeah.
It changes. Yeah. I'm not saying it's a good thing.
It's the hunger,
And that's where it's no plateau. Then you're starting to go. So if I'm like, we made it. We're on Netflix, we're on YouTube. It's good. I started to go down here. And then everything.
Yeah.
Are you a good salesman?
Yeah, I'm the best salesman. The best.
You just sold yourself.
But that's my greatest skill. My greatest skill. But selling is, for me, the most important, integral part of business. But it's a transfer of emotions, selling. And when you have a product that you believe in, selling becomes a lot easier. Because I have to transfer my emotions as I speak to you. And when I speak from the heart and I speak with passion, it's much easier to make that transfer. It's like I say to people all the time, it doesn't matter what you're selling. If you're selling a photocopier, you travel up and down the country selling photocopiers to businesses, if you know that in the back of your van, your photocopy is not great. The paper gets jammed, the ink, it doesn't flow properly and it runs out too quickly. When you're in there looking someone in the eye, telling them how great this photocopier is, that transfer of emotion changes when you know that in the back of your van, you have the best machine. You can stock up the paper and it flows out so beautifully. The ink lasts forever, and that's when it really is not just down to your selling technique, but down to the product that you have, your belief in that product and your passion for that product. I love boxing. Every fight has a story, and I can tell you about that story. I can tell you about that fighter, where they come from, their struggle, and I can make you invest in that fighter. Not financially, that will come, but emotionally, and that's really my greatest skill, because the other areas I'm solid, but that's what they do now. They roll me out. We have a huge team of people in the business, and I'm the front guy, the face, and they'll roll me out. This week we're in Abu Dhabi, and then I'll get on a plane, I'll go to Cleveland, and I'll do all the TV shows, all the press conferences and fight night, and then the week after we'll be back in London, and then they'll wheel me out to Phoenix for a show out there, and that's what I do. I sell. I sell the fight, I sell the narrative, and I sell the events.
And do you like the fame?
Not really, no. Like, I think as a kid, it's all you really want, isn't it? You know, like, oh, I'll be famous. And like, my dad was quite famous growing up, but he wasn't from the social media world. You know, it was well before his era. So fame was different back then. I would go into a local restaurant with him as a kid, and I would notice people say, oh, it's Barry Hearn, it's Barry Hearn, it's Barry Hearn. But now, because of social media, and especially because I've become like a meme, like, and you know, with all these quotes and, you know, the way the internet works, people recognize me a lot. And I like traveling because as you go into a different market, that fame, that attention decreases. And I guess I would never have wanted that to decrease, but I do now because it's quite intrusive, you know, and it makes you feel like you're living in a box sometimes, you know. The other day I was driving down the road in London. I just, you know, and you just feel someone's looking at you, you know, and I just looked to my left and there's a guy just with his phone, you know, like that. And I was like that. And then I sort of felt it from the other side, and I looked on the other side and there was someone else doing it from the other side. I was like, wow, you know, it's quite a strange life. Sometimes you feel like when you talk all day, like I do, sometimes you don't want to talk, you know. If I go for a coffee, I don't want to talk about boxing with someone in there who's just, you know, asked me for a photo. But also it's a recognition of the success we've had and their customers as well. It's quite different, you know. They're the people that pay to come to the shows. They're the people that buy the subscription on TV to watch my fights. So the last thing you want to do is, no, you know, like, no. But at the same time, it's sometimes, in the UK particularly, it's the feeling of it's a never-ending chat, you know. And of course, that conversation continues now digitally. So when you walk away from people, another one of my biggest weaknesses is my phone. You know, I have not quite learnt yet to put it down, turn it off, leave it, and stop ingesting information and opinions, because that's quite dangerous as well.
There is, you can get contaminated with information.
Oh, totally.
You know, how do you choose what to consume? I started, what I'm trying to do now, Eddie, is the last half an hour before I sleep and the first 20 minutes 1 hour. Because when I used to wake up till recently, I would go emails, missed calls, whatever. And I'm like, fuck that. No. So the first 20 minutes I get up, I ignore it. I close the alarm, I go, I drink my green juice, and I sit in the gym like, you know, just completely phased out. And I'm like this. I finish the juice, then I'm like, okay, now I will check you. Like, I want to be in control.
That's a good
thing. And I want, it's just this weird thing that who's in control of who. And then in 20 minutes, not the end of the world, it's just 20 minutes. But try it.
But ultimately as well, you know that without your phone and without digesting that information, your life would be very different.
Correct.
Because you don't need to know about that. All you need is your own world, really. So what I'm trying to work on is actually what I read on there will change my mood and the way I feel. And 9 times out of 10, it can only be negative, really. If I'm reading response from fight fans and criticism, and you know, there's very little positive reading on Twitter and Instagram, you know? So actually all you're doing is reading negativity and it's putting you in a bad mood. Actually, if you just focus on your world and what you believe is happening, life is very different. Why should you I said to Wayne Rooney once on my podcast, I was like, how do you handle, because I was reading some of the comments on his tweets. I said, how do you handle that? And he went, oh, obviously I don't read it. And I'm like, really? He went, no, why would I read that? You know, I'm like one of the greatest footballers of all time. I'm going to listen to some guy from Liverpool telling me how I should run my life and giving me his opinion. No, thank you. And then from then I thought, wow, that's so true. You know, you've achieved all this greatness. Why would you let that negativity come in? So that's something I'm definitely still working at.
My mother said something nice recently. She said, choose who you give your ears to and your eyes to. You choose. Eddie chooses. Okay, Anas, I'm gonna talk to you. X, no, you're always negative. I'm good. And I think it's something we need to really be aware of. Who are we giving our ears to? Because it's a privilege also. It's your time, it's your mind. If your bad mood is bad, then your daughter's gonna feel it.
Yeah, 100%.
Your colleagues are gonna feel it. So it's a responsibility onto ourselves. How would you respond to a lot of people who question your ethics?
That's sometimes the most difficult thing. You know, we've had that quite recently with, you know, drug tests in boxing and stuff like that. Something I take very personally because of my love for the sport, you know. Integrity is key for us as a business. And that hurts the most when you almost get accused of not loving the sport or respecting the sport, you know, because I kind of feel like it's something that we've had that respect for, not just for the sport, but from the public for a long time. So I think business is difficult. You know, sometimes you have to make decisions on the, you know, the spin of a coin, where you're put in a position where you have to act accordingly. Now, we said again off camera, opinions change over time. Some things that I've done in the moment 2 years ago, when I look back on now, I might think, shouldn't have done that actually, or should have done it differently. All you can do is stay true to yourself in the moment and make the decision that you feel is the right decision at the time. And that decision is based on many different things. You have to do the right thing. You have to do what's in the best interests of your fighter or the business, you know. And business is cutthroat. It's different to just an emotional feeling of well-being, you know. It's a different kind of animal. You always have to try and do the right thing. But business, you know, sometimes you have to make decisions that are very difficult, where others will not agree with. And again, over time, you might look back and say, could we have handled that differently? And I've actually done that recently. I thought, you know what, looking back, maybe we should have done that. But you know, if at the time, that's what you believe in your heart that you should do, I don't think anyone can criticize you. Really, you certainly can't criticize yourself, because you can't look back with regret and say, you know, I should have done that. Yeah, you believe you should have done that now because you've had the benefit of hindsight to see everything play out. But at that moment, do you remember when you're at your desk and you made that decision? You know, you kind of knew about the consequences, and you knew, you evaluated everything, and you decided that this was the right decision. So don't beat yourself up for that. You know, not everybody knows the situation you're in, the situation of the situation. You had to act accordingly. But as long as you make the decision based on, again, a good heart, but the right decision for business, and you have to be ruthless sometimes. You know, not everyone will agree with that ruthlessness, but sometimes you have to make key decisions, you know, as a business owner, that may upset people, and people may think we're brutal and ruthless, but they're the key decisions that can change everything.
I agree. Since it's your world, the boxing world, do you think it's a world that people collaborate and support each other, or it's a business where you need to throw the other under the bus, or that's what they do to move forward?
It's the worst business in the world.
Really?
Yeah. Everybody is trying to fuck everybody all the time. There is very little loyalty. You know, it's prize fighting. It's not a normal world. You know, these guys are getting paid to fight for our entertainment, or the public's entertainment. So it's a crazy world, and there's no barriers to entry. So anybody, you could finish this interview and go, I quite like boxing. I'm going to get into boxing. I'm going to manage some fighters. Next thing, me and you are negotiating, and you're telling me this fighter's worth 10 million. You don't even know the market. And I'm having an argument with you, you know? You have to sleep with one eye open, just because of that disloyalty between, you know, you never really know where you stand. And boxing as a business makes you pretty bitter and miserable, because things go wrong all the time, you know? And my dad, I saw that from my own dad. You know, as a kid, I would see him argue, and I would see him lose his temper and not have a lot of time with me because of boxing. And it's like looking in a mirror. And I look at these promoters that he used to argue with, that I'm now arguing with. They're 90, Bob Arum's 91, Frank Warren's 71. These are the same people that were his competitors and they're still in boxing. And when he left boxing, the changes that it made to him as a person were quite incredible. Like, he's the most laid back guy in the world now. But he wouldn't be if he was in boxing. And that's why I will always say to myself, not forever, because, you know, unfortunately, I'm good at it and I've been very successful at it, and now I have to defend the throne. But I know deep down that I will be a lot happier when I leave the boxing business. It may take away a little bit of my fire, you know, and I may lose that winning spirit in the morning, but I know on balance, you know, I can't do what I do forever because it's not healthy, really. And I work hard to make it more healthy. Try and train every day. You know, my preparation and the way I live my life is for longevity and for performance in business. You know, athletes train harder, they eat better, they try and sleep better. I do all those things to give myself longevity and edges in business, because life is about edges. You know, the 1%, the 2%, the way I can improve in other areas that other people aren't doing. Bob Arum, Frank Warren, 91, said, well, you think he's doing 10K every morning and he's having ice baths and he's trying to, you know, like, I'm doing that to try and stay switched on and to try and have longevity. But one day I will just walk off into the sunset. I'll let them all stay at it, you know. You guys carry on. I'm going. Thank you. Bye. Shut the curtain.
How interesting, man. I relate on the aspect that you're a boxing guy, I'm a football guy. And I treat even this as a sport. Like, when I'm having fun, it's my passion at the moment. I'll train. You know, when I started to train crazy, Eddie? COVID. Yeah. Because I'm like, no way I'm going to get depressed or miserable or going to lose team members and going to fire people. I need to be sharp. Trained every day. Yeah. Every day. And I love how sharp I can be. Then I'm like, how can I sleep 5% better? How can I drink a little more water? Yeah. How can I eat cleaner? Okay, get a cook. Just these, like you said, if I can fine tune my life.
Edges, you know, edges.
And, I love the word edges that you use.
But that's so true. Life's about edges. You know, life's about gaining an advantage. And all of those things that you did there give you more chance to succeed. I mean, success, you know, the one question I always ask on my podcast is, what is success?
I swear to God, that was my next question to you.
I love answer. I think it's such an incredible question, because I spent my whole life looking at people that I felt were not successful, right? And that would genuinely be someone that didn't have a great job, right? Wasn't really achieving in anything they were doing. Didn't have a great house, you know, might have had a mortgage, might have been on the breadline, struggling. Like, that for me is not success. You can't be a success. How can you be a success? You haven't achieved anything. But success actually is a feeling, and it's individualistic. So your version of success is not the, you know, overarching definition of success. It's success to you. And as long as you can be successful in terms of your definition, that's actually all that matters. So, like, I look at some people, those same people that I would looked at years ago and went, you don't even, like, you're in a 9 to 5, you don't even really, you don't even work, like, what are you trying to achieve? Don't you want to be the best at what you do? Not really. I actually just want to go to work, have a bit of fun, get paid, rush home to see my kids, take them out. You know, I go training with them on a Tuesday. We go bowling together on a Saturday, you know, and I'm loving life. But I always used to look at them and think, you're not loving life. How can you be loving your life? But actually, as you become more mature and see that, they, in their mind, have the most successful life, you know? So success to me now is actually a feeling. It's not a balance sheet. It's not an annual return. It's not, can we IPO, right? They're targets. And fulfillment can give you a feeling of success, but they're just targets and goals. Success is a feeling inside of that question you asked me earlier. Are you okay? You know, the answer, if you're not, you are not successful. It's a feeling. Doesn't matter what you got, doesn't matter, you know, what you've achieved, doesn't matter what job you're in, it's just a feeling. That's success. And again, it's taken me a long time to establish that and understand it. And that will evolve again over 10 years and 20 years. But fascinating question, because sometimes, and another thing that I ask people, and they tell me the same thing, this is high level performers. The feeling of emptiness when you achieve something that you felt you always wanted to achieve, right? Frank Lampard, when I won the Champions League, I lifted the trophy and it wasn't what I thought as a kid. Like if you had said to me as a kid, one day you're going to win the Champions League. Oh, you know, Mo Farah, you know, I won the Olympics, the 10,000 meters, the gold. And then 2 days later, I won gold in the 5,000. And I just felt a little bit empty after. What? How? You know, even me, away from sport, can do the biggest show in the world, right, of all time, break the records, attendance records, get home, sit in bed, empty. You know? Now, is that because you're a winner and you always want more? I mean, that's very dangerous, you know? But all these people never seem to be in that moment going, I can't believe it. It's what's next, you know? And that's what I've also learned to be. You've got to be very careful. I'm trying to enjoy the moment a lot more now. Because I listen to these people, I go, wow, that's frightening. Like, how can you win gold in the Olympics as an athlete and not just feel ultimate fulfillment? Why not? Is that just the winning mentality? That's just driven within it. What's next? You know what? It was good, but the time weren't quite fast enough. I'm telling you now, the next Olympics, I'm going to do that. But the danger of that is one day you sit as the, you know, the Lord above is about to take you, and you go, never really enjoyed those moments, did I? You know? So the balance is key.
Success is subjective, Eddie. But are you successful?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I don't think I've cracked it yet. Do you know what I mean? I don't think I've cracked life yet. Like, again, going back to my dad, I'm a long way off that mindset because I'm still so focused on what I'm doing. It's an addiction. It's a passion that you have to be all in on. You know, I don't switch off. Ever. Because I don't want to get beaten, you know? So in that respect, I don't think you can ever be successful by definition of my perception of successful, because success is a free mind in that respect. And my mind is definitely not free, because my mind is like spaghetti with a million different things going on. How am I going to make this show in Abu Dhabi the biggest success? How can I drive ticket sales in Cleveland next week? Then we got the show in London. You know, then what market are we going to be? So success is a free mind, I think. You know, the ability to sit there almost in Zen mode and just go, I'm untouchable. You know, you can't hurt me. And that comes over time. You know, I'm happy with where I am. That's different. Can I improve? On many different levels. But I'm looking forward to that day where you can sit there and go, we've done it. You know, life is great. And that may come over time.
We need to narrow this down. Although I can talk to you for easily another hour or two, by the way. What are you afraid of?
Not much, really. I think, again, like as you get older, you become, life is all about experiencing things, putting yourself in positions again and again and again. That's how you become successful or something. It's a bit like, you know, if you're a fighter and you walk out for the first time through backstage and through the tunnel. You know, that first time you do it, it's like, and then the next time you do it, and the next time you do it, it's just like if I do a press conference. You know, if I get up and speak in front of a couple of thousand people, okay, the first time, you know, you might, but then it's just repetition, and you become a little bit numb to things. That's a bit sad, really. Like, and that's happened to me a little bit in business because there's been so many experiences that it's hard to get that experience where you go, wow. Like we said earlier about those athletes, you know, it's just, it's a bit of a numbness. So probably the being afraid of not living with that buzz and that passion. Like, because when I do that, I will walk away from the sport, because that's when I feel like it's time to walk away. So the fear is probably living without passion and ambition.
Last two. If you had the gift, I would call it, of being, hopefully in many, many years, let's say 30, 40 years, to be amongst your loved ones, and you can choose the words before you pass, what would you choose?
To say to them? I think I do often think about, I'd like to be remembered fondly, weirdly. It doesn't really matter how you're remembered when you go. Like, you want to create an everlasting memory. And sometimes you can lose that personableness because of your drive in what you do. So people think that you change, but you don't actually change. You just become more focused on what you're doing. And because of that, you have to make sacrifices where others might think that you've changed. Oh, he doesn't have time for us anymore. You know, I mean, that's the classic, you know, the friends that you go, oh, Eddie, like, my mates will say all the time, you're a disaster. You don't even come back to us on WhatsApp. That's the sacrifice I have to make. I can't do everything, you know, but the ones that really know you and appreciate you, understand. And maybe that's something that I'd say, I hope you understand. You know, nice. I hope you understood what I had to do.
That's a good answer. And last one, Eddie in one word.
Eddie in one word? Don't know, I'm still trying to find that word.
What do you feel at this moment?
At this moment, I would say on a mission. You know, it's not one word.
Yeah, I know.
Three.
We'll give you that.
Just on a mission. Because at the moment, I have something in my mind that I want to achieve. And that's all I'm focused on.
Maybe driven.
Driven is probably the best word if you want just one.
Thank you. Appreciate it. This is good.